All right, and welcome to the Be Real, Get Real podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Matthews, co founder of Women's Prosperity Network. And this podcast is about bringing you real stories of real women who have been through some stuff, are on the other side. Probably I know I'm still going through some stuff, but sharing these stories so that you have opportunity to grow yourself, to expand, and to be the best you possible. Today, our guest is Dr. Melissa Balizan from Colorado, and we're going to be talking with her today about her journey through the medical field, her career, her profession, her entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about from stenosis to open and free. Welcome, Dr. Melissa.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you, and I'm curious too about stenosis because it's something I hadn't heard of before. And we'll dive into that in a moment. For our viewers, let me let you know just a little bit about her background and the beautiful, um, amazing woman and expert that we have with us on the show today. So, Dr. Melissa Balizan is the founder and CEO of Colorado Wife Consulting. She has over 20 years' experience in the healthcare field, combining Eastern and Western medicine. Dr. Melissa is a consultant, a concierge pharmacist who focuses on women's health and stress management, working to improve anxiety, depression, pain, and chronic health conditions. As an advocate for her clients, she empowers them to take charge of their health, educating them to know they have a choice. She uses her pharmaceutical training and knowledge of medication, supplements, nutrition, physical and mental health to guide her clients on their health journey and help them make informed decisions about their health and life goals. And I want to start off today by asking you, you came from this background of formal training in pharmaceutical, and you worked for many years in that industry. How did this, two-part question, how did this morph into what you're now doing? And also, did you always have this desire? Like I'm thinking to myself, choosing pharmacy, there was something inside of you that was connected to wellness, right?
Exactly.
Dial in.
Exactly. So, yes, I have always had the desire to help people and make a difference in their lives. And so, at a young age, when I was still in high school, I was kind of searching for things and I kind of knew I wanted to go into the healthcare field. I had a very dear family member, my mom, who had a rare condition. And so I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to figure out how I can find a cure for this, find something to help her out.
Wow.
That's what actually led me into pharmacy. I didn't want to go and be a physician at that time. I was like, nah, that's not quite it. And along the way, with looking at, going into pharmacy, I looked at, and there was a world available. I didn't have to go and just deal medications to people. I had the ability to do all kinds of things. And so throughout my career, even though I've worked for others in the past, I've actually been combining Eastern and Western medicine and looking at supplementation for people, making sure they don't interact with people. So this is 20 years worth of I've been doing this more and more. And for my mom, especially, we came up with a supplement regimen that actually helped her better than the Western medication she was
Wow.
on.
Wow.
So she's still on a few, there's a combination. So she's on
Uh-huh.
both. But yes, my passion has been there for a long time.
Well, and I heard a statistic that I think it's number two or number three cause of death is the misinteraction of different medications and things like that. And I don't know if I got the statistic right, but it's pretty high.
Yes, it is pretty high, and that's a huge passion of mine, and I've done that for a long time. I say optimizing your medications and supplements. What
Mm,
happens is you may be put on one medication by one physician, another by another physician, and then you decide to supplement on your own, and you don't have anybody to look over those. And absolutely, there is interactions that can happen with natural things,
mm,
with your medical things. So sometimes they combine and sometimes they don't, and those interactions can be severe,
Yeah.
which can lead to that statistic. And I don't know the exact statistic, but yes, interactions are dangerous.
Well, and I want to touch upon something here too, because I might think, oh, okay, so I've got these medications and I'm going to do these natural things. And we think because they're coined natural and they're not a prescribed thing, somehow we think that they're okay. Like we don't need to be concerned about it, but that's not true.
That is not true. I'm glad you brought that up. That is near and dear to me, to educate, to let the world know that natural does not necessarily mean safe.
Mhm.
Number one, you don't necessarily know what's in it. So you want to make sure you're getting a good quality product. And there are some great quality natural products out there. There are some not so great out there. So you got to be careful, got to do your research. And yes, those natural things can interact with other natural things, and they can interact with your regular prescription or over the counter medication. So you've got to be cautious of that and do your research.
Yeah. And so if I was to, and you may not know this answer, but if I was to get medication from my doctor and then I have a holistic healer that I also happen to work with who recommends these supplements, will my doctor be able to say yay or nay on whether I should do it?
That's a great question. Some of your physicians will,
Mhm.
some of them will not. It depends upon how well educated they are in that more natural holistic field. Same with your natural holistic provider. They may not be educated on the Western medicine side of things. And that's where somebody like me, who has that knowledge of both. Your physician is very highly educated in certain things, but they're not an expert in everything.
Mhm.
Your holistic provider is not an expert. So you've got to make sure that they work together and that, there's research done to figure out, okay, which is good and which is bad. My goal is to educate you to ask the right questions of your physician so that you can make the choice for yourself and say, okay, yeah, I want to try this holistic approach, this more natural approach. Are you okay with it? Will you support me? What can I help you understand more? Those kind of questions, so that they're on your side. You're not going against them, but that they can kind of understand. And they're, truthfully, physicians aren't given a lot of knowledge about natural supplements. And they have actually, well, as a pharmacist, I went through a lot of a lot of pharmacology.
Yeah.
Physicians go through less than I did, and they yet can still prescribe to you.
Right. Right. Yeah. Fascinating. Uh, so I'm like, you need to call Dr. Melissa to find out. Get her to help you, really get yourself the best treatment. And I'm thinking about what you said about your mom is that through a combination of the medications with supplements, the medications alone didn't give her the same result as the right combination, which you were able to do.
That's correct.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So use everything you can for optimum health and wellness. So make sure you get in touch with Dr. Melissa. Let's talk a little bit about your journey because you've been through quite a lot as it pertains, not only your career, but you went through a pretty severe physical trauma incident, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, as a healthcare provider, high stress level.
Mhm.
Most positions are high stress level, whether you're CEO, whether you're mom, whether you're just, not just, whether you are, wherever you're working, you're probably in a high stress environment. And for me, part of my journey, I was able to go through and I had pieces in place to help me with my stress management and my self care. What I didn't realize is I didn't have enough. And so I got to a point in my career where my health, I like to use the metaphor as I was hit over the head with a 2x4. And it took me a few years to actually figure it out because I was in the
Like, why
healthcare
does
field.
my head hurt? Right?
Exactly. I was in the healthcare field. I'm going through, I'm like, okay, well, let's go and do this and see this physician. Your body starts talking to you and you get symptoms. And so those symptoms, some of them I ignored, which that's part of my message is I want to make sure you're not ignoring your symptoms because your body will speak to you in more ways than one. And for me, What happened is the stenosis. So the stenosis that we talked about, and with the stenosis is like a narrowing, a constricture. And that can happen. That's a medical term. That can happen in various parts of your body. For me, that actually happened within my throat.
Oh,
And so my throat was closing off. It was like you were choking. No matter how much water you drank, it was just stuck. Couldn't go anywhere, couldn't go up, couldn't go down. Took me a while to find the right physician to get to where I was. Along my journey, I was going through and I'm like, okay, well, what really caused this? And as, of course, hindsight, always 2020, you look back, I started looking through things as I was going through my journey, what's going on? And I really took a hard look at my career. I had the great job. I have the toys and the fun and the ability to travel and all those things. I'm like, but what is this worth? What is this worth? It's really literally closing off my throat, shutting down my system as I was being silenced in certain areas of my career. My body was reacting. And so I really stopped and I looked, I was like, okay, I finally found the right physician. Now I need to have surgery to open this up so that I don't feel like I'm choking. Don't feel like I can't breathe. And I really took a hard look. I'm like, is my health really worth this this particular job? Because my career, I still say my career is pharmacy. I'm still doing that. But that particular area, and I really believe it was a gift. It was a gift from God to say, hey, it's time to move on. It's
yeah.
time for you to move on.
It sounds like you've had that moment in life when many of us have, especially after we've, followed the path we were told, go to school, go to college, get a good job. That, this is where society, mainstream society wants you to go. And you could wake up. Now, number one, I want to comment on the when you talked about stress. I think that one of the challenges we have in our world today is stress is expected and accepted, and we don't realize the impact that it's having on us over time. And then the second thing is that you wake up one day feeling all those effects of stress in your physical health and your mental health and your relationships. Like, it pours everywhere when you're not feeling fulfilled and happy and there's just so much stress around it. You wake up one day and you go, is this really how I'm supposed to be living? Really? That's what this was all about? I don't know why I was working so hard to get here.
Exactly, exactly. And that I mean, you hit it. Stress is in our society, stress is expected.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. You can find a way to mitigate it, to manage it, to eliminate it potentially. I mean, there's still pieces that are going to come up. And our body has, I'll talk a little medical again, our body has the fight or flight syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's your stress response. And that's necessary when you're put in that critical situation. There's a fire in your house and you need to run out. But what we've done is we've heightened our senses so much that we're living at that fire level all the time and we don't know the difference.
Yeah, our adrenals get exhausted, right? That's a big piece of it. And there's all kind of symptoms. So I love that you also said you got to pay attention to your body,
Yes.
because just because, you might be advancing in years doesn't mean that your knees have to hurt when you walk up and down the steps.
That's exactly right. Your knees should not have to hurt. It can,
Or your back or your shoulder.
or your back. Right. Age is just a number. That's just a number. And depending upon how, you listen to your body, you take symptoms. I was talking to somebody just the other day, speaking of her knees. She's like, when I eat this certain food, my knees hurt. So she started eliminating that certain food. Guess what? Her knees aren't hurting. But that was a symptom. Her body was saying, hey, I don't like this.
I know.
And so same thing, maybe it's that headache you get at 3 p.m. every day. And you're like, why do I get a headache at 3 p.m.? There's something going on there. I mean, and that's a mild thing. Most all of us get some form of pain somewhere.
Well, and you know, it's interesting. I'm going to go on a tangent for a moment. About 2 weeks ago, I noticed that in the morning after I got up and I did my morning routine, which is, I make my coffee, I drink, I watch, something motivational, I read, I journal, like I have this whole little ritual I do. But I noticed myself feeling a little jittery or dizzy or lightheaded. And I was like, oh, what's that about? Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And I was just, no, just breathe, Nancy, just breathe. And I noticed that throughout the day, it eased up. And I was like, well, what could this be? I'm sleeping good. I wake up, I'm doing my normal routine. And then I had a thought. I wonder if it's from caffeine.
It's possible.
And I did an experiment and I bought half caffeinated instead of full caffeinated. I bought half caffeinated coffee, and I've been drinking coffee in the morning for decades. Like it's my morning ritual. So I experimented, and guess what? Those symptoms went away.
Amazing.
Yeah. But here's the thing: how could it be? All these years, caffeine was no issue, and then all of a sudden it was.
So it is. It's not the number. I'm not going there. It's not the number. What happens is our bodies do change over time. We have hormones. Yeah. We have a lot of different hormones, not just, there's hormones that make us feel good. There's hormones that make us do different things. And those hormone levels can change. Mm-hmm. And my guess, without more details, but my guess would be, since you did that little experiment, you had a slight hormonal change mm-hmm. that caused that caffeine to say, I don't quite like that right now. That's my thoughts there.
I was happy it worked.
Yes, that's good. It's real good.
And part of the reason I wanted to share that particular story is where you were talking about listening to your body. So I could have had many different reactions to that, as opposed to, going to the connection. Well, what am I putting in my body that I know is a huge, huge factor. Just like with the girl, when you talked about when she eats a certain food, her knees hurt. When I eat certain Mexican food, I get such an upset stomach. I love the way it tastes, but I don't like the way it makes me feel. Right. That's what we have to look at. So let's talk about the transition from you. So you got this wake up call, you were hitting the head with 2x4 and it took a while to realize what was going on. How was it to transition from, that, great paying job, what you had worked for all these years too? Because not only, is it about the money, it's like I invested myself in this. How did you make the transition? Because there may be somebody listening in a similar situation.
That's a great question. So the transition, it was a little difficult. It was, I had to really think about it. There was a moment that I knew that I was no longer meant to be there. Mm-hmm. And then I fought it for a little while before I actually decided to move on. But making that transition is, I was so, when I made that decision, when I knew in my head, I was like, this is not the place. I need to find some other place or some other thing to do. I took a look at why I was doing it. So came back down to, why did I go into pharmacy to begin with? My purpose. And so the transition, I then took a couple of months for myself. I'm like, okay, I hadn't been taking care of myself and my health reacted. So I took some time for me, really looked into, what can I do better? And as I started doing that, I started realizing that I had lost my passion for where I was at the moment. And so I was able to then rekindle my passion and be able to move forward and say, okay, I can still go and make a difference and save lives and change lives, still using the knowledge that I went to school for. I can do it on my own, just slightly different. So having that time to think, that's always a good thing. Sit and listen, sit and think. So for me, it took a couple months. Not everybody has that much time. Maybe you start listening now. So let's listen to your body, figure out, okay, what are you putting up with that you don't want to put up with anymore? And that's kind of where I was. I was like, okay, I don't want to put up with this anymore.
Really good.
My health and my family is more important to me than this particular job. And that was my turning point. I was like, okay, let's change. And then as I started looking, I was like, I can still make a difference. And that was my key. I listen to myself and you listen to yourself. What is your purpose? And what is that core thing that you want? What are you guided to do? And that's how I was able to realize that I could still do this. It would just be a little bit more difficult, because I didn't have the higher support. I
And you
found
don't have
other
the whole
support.
infrastructure
Right,
around.
I didn't have the infrastructure, but I was able to find other support, just like Women's Prosperity Network. I was able to find different communities to support me in making that transition. And for me personally, as I look back, both my parents had, I mean, my dad had it wasn't a regular 9 to 5, but he had work
Corporate
for somebody
career.
else,
Yeah.
but they were also entrepreneurs in themselves. They had two businesses of their own.
Wow.
And so as I look back, I'm like, well, they did it. Why shouldn't I be able to do this?
Yeah,
And
that's
it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be in your genes, but there's other people out there doing things.
mhm.
And so I was like, I can do this and I can still have the impact that I want to have.
Love it. Love it. Good. And we're all happy that you did because now you're here serving all of us. So, Dr. Melissa, thank you for being with us today. Please let our listeners know how they can find you, reach you, and have you support them in this beautiful integration between Eastern and Western to live and feel your best. How do they get in touch with you?
Oh, thank you, Nancy. The easiest way to get in touch with me is I actually set everything up in a Linktree account. Nice one spot to go. So it's linktr.ee / Dr. Melissa B. B
Okay.
as in boy.
We'll put that link for you here as well, so it's real easy for you to reach out and access her. I want to thank you for making time to be with us today. I appreciate you greatly and look forward to hearing more stories of how you've been really making a difference in people's lives because I know that you are. So thank you, Dr. Melissa.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure and my purpose, and that is our pleasure and purpose here at Women's Prosperity Network. So be sure to tune in again next week for another episode of the Be Real, Get Real podcast and check out all the many ways Women's Prosperity Network is here to support you in living your best life as you make a positive impact for yourself as well as for others. Have a blessed day, everybody. Bye. Bye, Dr. Melissa.